This lesson is on word order when we use dependent clauses in the German language. If you do not know what a dependent clause or an independent clause is in the English language, you're going to have a lot of trouble with this lesson. So come to me for some one-on-one support if you need help with these definitions. I give you some information here to refresh you in case that's all you need. An independent clause can stand alone, and they always express a complete grammatical thought, whereas a dependent clause cannot stand alone and does not need to express a complete thought. The learning targets for this lesson is that I know I can identify and define an independent clause and a dependent clause. When it comes to German, I can correctly order words in an independent clause. That's review. I can correctly order words in a dependent clause. That's new information. I recognize that weil and wenn are subordinating conjunctions that affect word order in German. Subordinating conjunctions, that's a definition you'll need to know. I know that weil means because, and wenn means whenever and if, or when. So here are some examples of German dependent clauses and independent clauses and the word order of each of those clauses. So here are actually two, I have the German then the English, two example sentences. The sentence goes across this whole line. So the first part of the sentence is an independent clause and the second part is a dependent clause. We're going to be using the conjunctions wenn and weil to start our first dependent clauses in the German language. Remember that weil means because and wenn means when or if. That information is right over here. We're going to use these to add a modifying clause to a sentence. So far, we know how to create simple sentences, such as Mehmet hört Musik. Again, Mehmet hört Musik. Mehmet listens to music. Now we want to add an additional layer, and that layer is when he is sad, he listens to music. So Mehmet hört Musik, wenn traurig ist. So in an independent clause, you should know that word order goes, anything can be first except for the verbs. So here we have just standard, the subject of the sentence, which is Mehmet. Then in the second position, you must in an independent clause place the conjugated verb. Mehmet hört. The verb hört comes from hören, which means to listen or to hear. Then we have everything else. In this case, everything else is the object, what is being listened to, which is music, Musik. Okay, that's our independent clause, that's our word order. The most important rules are verb has to be in second position, and if you don't put the subject first, it's got to be as close to the verb as you can get it. So I could say Musik hört Mehmet, and that still means that Mehmet listens to music. Now for the word order in dependent clauses, the conjugated verb goes at the end of the sentence. So it'd be like hört coming at the end of this sentence. The clue or the signal for that to happen is often going to be a conjunction word like wenn or weil. So whenever you use wenn, which is a subordinating conjunction, you're creating a dependent clause. And the word order here is that you put in the conjunction, so here it's wenn. Right after the conjunction has to come the subject. Is the subject. Then everything else in the sentence, which is in this case is sad, traurig. And then at the very end of the sentence comes that conjugated verb, ist. So when he is, that is coming at the end of the sentence. Everything else, which was sad, is coming here. Subject is as close to the conjunction as we can get it. It's going to be the same rule when we're using the conjunction weil, the same rules. Renata geht nach Hause, so Renata goes home. We have subject and verb in first and second position. Then everything else, which is a prepositional phrase, nach Hause. And then our dependent clause, our signal is weil, which is a conjunction. And we have the subject as close to the conjunction as possible because the verb's going to get kicked to the end. And then we have müde, which means tired, and then the verb at the end, ist. So because she is tired, in German, that is weil sie müde ist. Your tendency, the mistake you're going to make is going to be to follow the word order rules that we've learned for regular statements, independent clauses. Make sure that doesn't happen. Make sure this ist isn't making its way here. Here's a more in-depth explanation of dependent clause word order. And now we're going to actually swap the dependent clause to that first position and put the independent clause to the second when we come to these sentences down here. So we have one example sentence here. And it's Ich bleibe im Bett, wenn ich krank bin. So that's exactly like these sentences on this page where we start with an independent clause and end with a dependent clause. So the word order is normal for the first part, then we have a comma, and then we have wenn ich krank bin. So that verb, conjugated verb bin, got kicked to the end, and the subject is as close to the verb as possible. So ich, the subject, is close to wenn. Not close to the verb, close to the conjunction, sorry. Wenn is the conjunction. Now pay attention to when a sentence starts with a dependent clause. So we can start with this, wenn ich krank bin. Wenn ich krank bin, when we start with a dependent clause, it's going to change the word order of the independent clause that follows. No longer do we have regular word order, ich bleibe im Bett or im Bett bleibe ich. Now we have to have that verb front and center. So the verb comes directly after the dependent clause, separated by a comma. As in all German statements, the verb is in second position. So think of it this way. The dependent clause takes up all of position 1, and we can remember our rule that the verb has to go in second position. So here's bleibe, the verb, in second position, and then we have subject and everything else. Here's a more broken down explanation of what I just went over, which is when you start with a dependent clause, think of position 1 as being taken up by the entire dependent clause. So the subject, the whole sentence, subject, verb, conjunction, adjective, that's position 1. So what's our rule? Well, position 2 comes the verb. So that's why bleibe is here. Position 3, the subject's got to be as close to that conjugated verb as possible. So that's why it's there, and then everything else. Remember that in a independent clause, word order is pretty variable. You can say krank bin ich instead of ich bin krank, right? The subject doesn't have to go in first position, but the verb must go in second position. Same thing with this sentence. Instead of ich bleibe im Bett, we can say im Bett bleibe ich. So here's another chart that breaks down those positions, and now we have two different sentences that we're dealing with. And keep in mind that this is the example for when we start with a dependent clause and then follow up with positions 2, 3, and 4. That will be our independent clause. So the dependent clause, and you got to know the word order rules there, right? And I have a reminder right here. Dependent clause takes up position 1. So wenn ich krank bin, and then position 2 verb, bleibe, position 3 subject as close to the verb as possible, so ich, and then position 4 everything else. Sometimes there'll be a prefix from a separable prefix verb, so im Bett. Same thing with this sentence, weil sie müde ist in position 1, geht is the verb in position 2, Renate nach Hause. Here's a preview of your first assignment using dependent clauses. So it's a short constructed response assignment. You have to answer 10 questions that begin with the question word warum, which means why. You will also have 10 choices of answers A through J. So 10 choices meaning they'll be on this side, so Basketball lieben, Katze haben, krank sein, Hunger haben, glücklich sein, etc., etc. The answers contain infinitive phrases so that they are incomplete. This is an incomplete answer. You're going to have to do something to it. You need to make a dependent clause by using the conjunction weil, using the answer choice that makes the most sense. Pay close attention to the subject of the question, as the subject of your answer will be determined by that. So what does that mean? Well, let's look at number 1 and consider everything about it. Warum gehst du nicht in die Schule? Let's read that again. Warum, so why, gehst du nicht in die Schule? So this question is asking, why aren't you going to school? And the subject in pink is you. So when I answer this, I'm not going to answer with du, meaning you. I'm going to answer with ich, meaning I, because that's how you answer a you question. So why aren't you going to school? We have love basketball. I have a cat, and we have I'm sick. I mean, that's not what these say, but once I translate them, once I put ich in there and weil, that's what they will mean. I think the one that makes the most sense is being sick, not because I love basketball or have a cat. So, weil ich krank bin. So, sein needs to be conjugated, and the form that we have for sein that falls under ich is bin. Ich bin. Because I am sick. I had to follow the word order rules. You're just making a dependent clause here, so it's not a complete sentence. But the word order is that we start with that conjunction weil, the subject comes close, and the verb, which is normally right in second position, is kicked to the end. So that's why bin is at the end and krank is before it. Let's look at number 2. Warum spielt Josef Basketball? So why does Joseph play basketball? So it could be because he's hungry, it could be because he's happy, and it's actually these choices too, because he likes basketball or loves basketball, because he has a cat, or because he's sick. Well, if the question is why does he play basketball, my best guess is because he loves basketball. So we have to say because he loves basketball. So we start with because, weil, then we have the subject, then we have Basketball, because our verb is kicked to the end, liebt. Remember to conjugate the verb. I had to lop off that en ending, put the t on, and conjugate it correctly for So answer these 10 questions. Make sure you answer in complete dependent clauses, just like I did here. So assignment 2 is in labs. We won't be going over that today. That's it for dependent clause work for the first half of this week. Stay tuned for another video that goes over a few additional layers to this.